Hello and welcome to Turning Lewks, a beauty and cosmetics podcast. I am your host, Darren, and welcome back to a new episode in a new year. Happy 2025. This is the first episode in 2025, so we're going to do our standard looking at the year ahead. What trends and stuff do we think we're going to be seeing? What kind of products do we think are going to be coming out? And looking at what experts have been saying around the future of makeup in 2025. So let's get into it. Now, I love doing these episodes. I love diving in, looking, doing some research into what people are thinking about, what people are talking about in terms of what their makeup styles and techniques are going to be for 2025, especially when it comes to makeup artists, big makeup artists, celebrity makeup artists, and the people that are kind of almost creating the bigger trends that aren't just the TikTok trends that are the throwaway trends. One of the big things that I saw a lot of people talking about was the continuing of matte foundations. And I saw this kind of coming towards the end of last year. We're seeing a lot of more basically matte foundations coming back onto the market, but under the disguise of blurring foundation, smoothing foundation, which basically means they're matte. You know, shiny and glowy foundations will highlight pores and texture more than matte products do because of the way it reflects light. So these new like satin foundations and semi-matte, luminous matte, all kind of, it's basically saying they're hydrating. It's an updated formula, a new formulation of these kind of matte foundations that we've had in the past, but they're saying they're blurring and smoothing, which basically means they're matte or at least semi-matte. We're seeing them in new forms. I think historically matte foundations have always been full coverage, but we're seeing a lot of lighter coverage matte finishes, but they're still matte foundations. The new Huda Beauty blurring foundation is basically a semi-matte foundation, but we're calling it blurring and smoothing instead of saying it's matte. Another thing that we're seeing in the complexion foundation part is foundation sticks. We're going to be seeing a lot more of them this year. We've already seen a few launches already, Milani, Maybelline, all coming out with, I think, a more low coverage skin tint in a stick style. They say this is because it's easier or quick on the go. I'm not really sure how a stick foundation is really that much quicker and on the go than other ones, other than the fact that it's easier to carry around. There's less chance of it leaking everywhere. But smearing a stick and having to blend that out with your fingers isn't as easy doing that on the transfer as putting a liquid foundation on with a brush. So I don't really see it being that much easier or on the go as they try and push them to be. But stick foundations in a light coverage foundations in this more cream formula is an interesting take. It's not the full coverage foundation sticks that we're used to in the past, the very drag queeny techniques there. So it's again this updated formula of foundation sticks. I personally also think that maybe towards spring, summer, and maybe even towards more mid to late end of the year, we're going to be seeing cushion foundations. See, last year, Tier blew up on social media and blew up everywhere, was talking about cushion foundations in many different formulas, whether they were full coverage, light coverage, matte. But I think that means we're going to see other brands potentially duping them. So brands like maybe Makeup Revolution, maybe e.l.f. coming out with a cushion foundation to kind of be inspired by the tier craze that we saw earlier last year, mid last year. I love a cushion foundation. I remember like 10 years ago, L'Oreal had a cushion foundation that I loved. I loved applying it, the cushion foundations with like dipping a beauty blender into the cushion foundation and applying it that way. I always felt like I got quite a nice light coverage back then when light coverage wasn't as trendy as it is now. Another trend that I saw when looking into makeup is messy makeup. And glitter is here to stay. So still that like 90s grunge influence. Mac, we're talking a lot about quiet grunge, and Daniel Martin was also talking about this quiet grunge where this kind of undone, messy makeup, shimmery on the lids is still going to be around, still here. That's my favorite kind of makeup. That's my style of makeup. Just messy, a little bit glittery and shimmery. I love that. It's my vibe. It's easy to do and doesn't take too long to do too. You can kind of almost do it with your fingers and be done. That's my kind of makeup. More makeup that I think that we're going to be seeing more of this year, and it's this kind of bringing editorial techniques and editorial makeup into the everyday, into the kind of just general public. And I'm kind of dubbing it as ugly makeup in inverted commas, but it's kind of almost bruised looking, oil slick makeup. Think Jay Thirlwell when she originally came out and her first single, Isn't Maya French, her kind of makeup style, this kind of undone, but still got a lot of like shimmery colors and stuff on your eyelids. Donny Davy and Patrick Tar were talking about this kind of this more undone look, using less concealer on the under eyes to bring out your under eye colors and use that as part of the makeup, thinking like Charlie XCX and that kind of vibe. And those two makeup artists were really talking about how that's going to be a big thing for this year in terms of it's not about completely covering everything and having this perfect skin, but actually using these imperfections in inverted commas and flaws in inverted commas as ways to incorporate them into your makeup and use them as part of the makeup style that you're going for. Oh, and you thought the blush craze was over in 2024? Apparently not. Apparently, in 2025, we're going to be experimenting with blush placement and blush colors even more. According to Patrick Tar, now I feel like Patrick Tar has a big investment in blush and wanting to keep blush as a trend, as that's his main product that I think he sells. Product that most people are shopping Patrick Tar for are his blushes and his blush technique of putting cream on top of powder. So of course he wants to make blush new every year to keep people buying his stuff. But there's a few people that were talking about how we're going to be experimenting with blush placement and colors. We'll have new colors coming in. A very 80s inspired blush as well. Apparently on Pinterest, purple and new wave were searches that had gone up towards the end of last year. So we're potentially going to be seeing some more purple colors coming out and more in a more of an 80s style. So very strong blush. Thinking kind of almost to like the new romantic era of makeup as well in terms of that new wave makeup. It's very strong, very bold, very in your face. Again, I like that. I'd like to see that coming out to be more of a thing and more of a trend and seeing what the modern take on that 80s vibe could be. I'm very interested to see that. And lastly, we have to finish this episode, this very quick, very short episode of just talking about new trends on the Pantone color of the year, Mocha Mousse. It's a very interesting color. Actually, it's an interesting color. I said that. I don't actually think it's that interesting of color. It's a brown. It's quite interesting. In some swatches and shades, it looks like a warm brown. Some swatches and shades, it looks like a neutral brown. Some swatches and shades, it looks like a cool brown. So I think it's one of those make it what you want to make it kind of brown shades. Personally, I think actually it's more of a warm brown, which isn't my favorite kind of brown. I prefer much cooler tone colors. That's just my vibe. But I think a lot of brands are going to interpret how they want and how they're seeing things. We were seeing cool tones really coming out at the end of last year. Huda Beauty's Christmas palette was Icy Nudes. Called Icy Nudes? I think it was called Icy Nudes. That featured a lot of cool tones and a lot of the makeup trends and styles that we saw towards the end of last year. Again, were very cool tone grays on the eyes. So I do think that potentially is going to be continuing carrying on. Maybe that's the way people are going to use Mocha Mousse. We've already seen some collections dropping from some brands that seem to be heavily inspired by Mocha Mousse. MAC just launched a news collection, which is bringing back some old shades, some new shades, some old shades and new formulas, all around this nude kind of brown color, whether it be cool tones and warm tone browns. There's a lot of focus on the warm tones, which I'm very excited for. I'm so excited to get my hands on the Stone lipstick. That's just that lip liner is my perfect lip liner, perfect lip shade. So that is a lipstick. Sign me up. But again, in the eyeshadow palette they brought out with that was very neutral, almost cool leaning. But that seemed to be heavily inspired by the Mocha Mousse. We also saw Natasha Denona come out with a mini eye sculpt palette towards the end of last year, which again is just a heavily brown palette aiming at contouring the eyes. But again, when Mocha Mousse is just about to be launched, brands can pay to see what the color of the year is going to be ahead of time. So I do wonder if some brands have done that so that they can see what's going to come out so they can launch things at the right times. But with that being said, I do think we're going to see a lot more neutral kind of neutral shades coming out. I think bronzer is going to be creeping up and being. I think bronzer is going to creep up and become more and more of a popular thing. We're probably going to see more brown tone blushes as well in that kind of experimental new shades kind of way. Maybe some more brown leaning blushes, brown rosy brushes. A lot more bronzer contour sticks are going to be coming out. I think stick makeup is going to really take hold this year over liquid products. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of liquid bronzers and liquid blushes. I find they're a bit more too finicky to apply and harder to use. I much prefer a cream stick one where you can apply it easier. I think the formula is easier to use. I think it's just all around just a better way to apply those kind of products if you want to do it in a liquid way. Personally, powders is always my go-to when it comes to bronzers, blushes, and stuff. I just think it gives like a nice airbrush blended look a lot easier than sometimes creams and liquids can. But I do think stick products are going to be a big thing this year. It's like stick foundations. Just seeing these Eldridge release basically a stick concealer in the shape of a pencil, but it's a stick concealer. It's all aimed at pinpointing pinpointing like pimples and stuff like that, her pinpointing technique. Very interesting to see that glorified basically eyeliner as a concealer for a specific technique to use. But again, it's in that stick format. So I think, we're going to be seeing stick products coming out in new ways and new and innovative ways of brands taking on what a stick means and what a stick can do and what a stick can be. Stick eyeshadows. There's so many things that that type of product can fall into. One thing I think has maybe gone a bit too far towards the end of last year, and I've seen a lot of influencers talking about like nuances in makeup, but I feel like it's almost got to a point where we've taken it too far, and it's just a new way to keep buying more makeup because this eyeshadow has a slightly different hue than this one, or this blush has a slightly different hue than this blush. When actually, when you put it on your face, they all look the same. And just because there's maybe a very slight difference in shade, doesn't mean you need to buy them all. Doesn't mean you need them all. Because if someone's getting really, really up close to your face, are they going to notice that shade difference or not? Similarly, with I've seen influencers talking about, oh, this shade is just ever so slightly off my skin color, so it just ever so slightly doesn't look right. I'm like, again, no one's looking at your face, studying your face long enough to really realize that maybe that's an off shade, unless it's completely off. But for the most part, if it's just slightly nuancedly off, no one's going to notice. No one's getting that close to your face unless they're kissing you. And by that point, they're not interested in the foundation, your makeup you're wearing, to notice if your makeup is just slightly off. And I do think there's a few influencers who will talk about nuances in makeup and nuances in shade and all this kind of stuff as a way to make people buy more makeup because it's slightly different, or trying to find the difference in things that aren't really that different, whilst also trying to preach about consumerism and not overspending. And it's this weird duality of like, maybe do your research beforehand, sure, yes, but also understand that like once these products are on your face, they blend in with your skin tone, they blend in with your other makeup products, they wear off just everyday life. People aren't that interested in the makeup you're wearing as much as maybe influencers try and make out that they are. But what are you most excited for this year in terms of makeup trends? Has there been a trend that you've kind of noticed or seen that you think is really interesting to you? Will you be trying any of these? As always, my go-to is always use the makeup you've got. If you see new trends coming out, that use your makeup that you've already got to try those new trends. If you want to try those trends, you don't have to follow trends if you don't want to. Do the makeup that you like, you love, that works for you and your lifestyle. Makeup is a personal thing for you and not something you have to follow other people doing and keeping up with trends. If you like a makeup style, a makeup color, a makeup technique, you keep doing that. Don't let other people tell you how you should and shouldn't be wearing makeup, and that you constantly need to be buying new makeup. That's not what it's about. It's about having fun and expressing yourself. It's not that deep. And that's going to be it for this video. Don't forget to like this episode if you do, subscribe, share it around to your friends if you think they'd be interested in listening to this podcast. We've got so much coming for 2025, new guests, new conversations, new chats. It's going to be so good. I can't wait for it all. And I can't wait to take you on the journey with us. So until next time, bye.